Well, hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about the book, Dan Simmons' book, Carrion. This is a horror novel that kind of wanders around the country a little bit. Has a lot of moving pieces, but I enjoyed this. So I wrote my notes down elsewhere. But one thing definitely worth pointing out. Sorry, I am... Alright, so I apologize. I had to edit that out. I am getting over the effects of allergies, so yeah, things are greening up here, and my allergies came out to play over the weekend. And I'm getting over them, but I wanted to record this Sunday, but my voice wasn't up to it. But anyway, Dan Simmons is, I have my notes here. Dan Simmons is an interesting author because he often writes his novels with, in many different genres. He's not just a science fiction author. He's not just a mystery author. He's not just a historical. He's all over the place. Carrion Comfort is a horror novel with some action thrown in. Now, I've reviewed another one of his horror novels. It was actually my very first book review, Song of Kali, and I'll admit, it won some awards, but I didn't really care for it. I may reread it at some future point just to see if my opinion has changed, but yeah. But this one is different. I liked this one. While I was suffering my allergy thing all weekend, I should have mowed the lawn the one day. The other day it rained all day, so that wasn't possible. And I read this book, so I've got this hayfield out here that I've got to deal with yet. Thanks to Dan Simmons, so I may have to hire somebody and send him the bill. But this is kind of an atmospheric horror, and what's interesting is this is a horror with some monsters, but these are monsters that look like you and me. These are what we call emotional vampires. Now, we all have seen Dracula and all the various iterations of vampires. The Strain tried to do its own unique take on vampires. So I kind of enjoyed this one. These are people who can control you against your will and make you do things you wouldn't normally do. And afterwards, of course, this being outside your experience, you may try to justify it. You may, push it out of your memory. Or they may take you over entirely and completely burn out everything that makes you, you. There's an example later in the book where the heroes have a 5-year-old boy who's been taken over by a vampire, and once the boy is away from the vampires, he's basically brain dead. His brain stem is functioning, keeping his life systems alive, but that's all that's left of him. So that's the kind of thing that they can do. These emotional vampires can cause us to be our worst selves. They can encourage the worst impulses in humanity. And somehow they can even gain sustenance from doing this. So the novel actually begins in a German concentration camp with a 14-year-old boy named Saul Lasky. And he has resolved to fight. He's going to survive. And one night, the camp guards come to the little bunkhouse that he and the other prisoners are in, and he is selected to go. And he's he's in his mind, he's thinking, I'm not going to go. I think by the time this happens, he's 17. But anyway, he's first in the concentration camp at 14. But the important thing is he said, I'm not going to go. And he finds himself getting up and going out the door entirely against his will. And later on in the novel, he relates the whole full story of what happened next. And the nightmare of being controlled by another human being. So he also in this scene meets the big villain of the book. Herr Oberst is how he's called. He's known as Wilhelm von something or other. But, I remember him and he's usually referred to as Herr Oberst. Occasionally as Willie, which is a nickname some of his friends call him. And I put friends in air quotes because these are friends who sometimes think it's fun to try and kill him. Yeah! So the main action of the book actually takes place in late 1980 to early 1981, and it actually brings up, the presidential election. Jimmy Carter had just lost his election for a second term. Ronald Reagan will be coming in. Make of that what you will. But the novel is told in the first person and third person through its various parts. And at first I thought, why? That's a weird stylistic choice. But I realized by the choice of who the first person is, why the author chose to do that. So first person is actually comes from one of the author's dreams. He had a dream of an old lady being chased by a helicopter with a gun. And that scene actually does make it into the book, which a lot of things from dreams, once you just think about them, you're like, oh, yeah, that didn't really make any sense. Well, by putting her in first person, this old lady, he actually makes her, in some ways, sympathetic, and in some ways, you realize how depraved she actually is. Her name is Ms. Melanie Fuller, and she is an old lady. She has some shocking views, very racist views, and she just talks about them and uses some of the words for, people who are minorities, and you're just like, ah. But then you realize that, okay, that's the author showing you how this character thinks and making the point that these are, should we call them sociopaths? Psychopaths? They're basically very minimal moral ability. They don't care who they hurt. And you get to see that right away with Ms. Fuller. The very first action scene, one of her servants is taken over by another emotional vampire and tries to kill her. So we end up with a big chase scene where she's trying to get away, and old lady, and this emotional vampire controls various people, all in an attempt to kill her. And so she, in turn, Ms. Fuller, takes over other people. So a lot of innocent people end up dying during her desperate escape. And she doesn't care. She's just, throw you in front of the guy that's swinging the knife. Throw you into the street. Whatever she has to do. And it's just a bloodbath. She even has one guy as just as a distraction. She takes him over, has him kill the other emotional vampire finally, and and any innocent bystanders, and then sends him down to the lobby of the hotel to kill hotel clerk and as many people as he can, and then turn the gun on himself. And you're just like, woo! So yeah, evil lady. And it's crazy that she can be sympathetic at the same time, but in some ways you do kind of feel sorry for her. Not many, but a few ways you feel sorry for her. And later in the book, she goes on to sow absolute chaos in inner city Philadelphia. The action starts in Charleston, but later on, inner city Philadelphia. That actually culminates with her being chased by a helicopter. And then later on, because, she lives through that, I will admit that. Later on, she goes on to cause chaos again in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, the three main protagonists, you read the back of the book and you think it's all going to be about this Jewish Saul Lenski, but it's not. You have Bobby Lee Gentry, who's... Sorry, my microphone thingy wants to shut down. Okay. So you have Bobby Lee Gentry, his appearance is he's a hick sheriff, overweight, very good old boy. But he's also extremely well-read, very erudite man, very knowledgeable. He reads a lot of different things, a deep thinker. Of course, you have Saul Lasky, who is now a psychologist and a lecturer at a college. So he does more college work than he does psychology. And then you have Natalie Preston, who's the daughter of one of the random victims of Ms. Melanie Fuller. But she wants to know why her dad died. And They end up eventually getting together, and Saul Lasky relates the rest of his story, and finally decides he can trust them enough to share this whole idea of emotional vampires that he has. He knows of two. He knows of Herr Oberst, and he knows of another one that Herr Oberst controlled him to cause him to kill. And now they know about Melanie Fuller. So all this time, Saul Lasky has been thinking, well, Herr Oberst is the one. And he's been trying to find the guy. And so you end up with three really well-drawn main characters, and you get attached to them. And I'll be honest, even a lot of the minor characters are very distinct, and you remember them, and they have personalities. Even the ones who've been controlled kind of get their own sort of personality, even though they're controlled by somebody. I will admit that I found some of the FBI agents in the book very interchangeable, and I found some of the gang members in the book very interchangeable, because inner city Philadelphia, of course the gang was involved. So there's a lot of balls in the air with this book. I criticized another book recently for having a lot of different stories going on and a lot of different characters. This is an example of how to do it right. Yes, there are a lot of characters, but no more than needed. Enough to tell the story. The main story. And yeah, it's a little bit to the story. You can't just breeze through it. You have to pay attention when you're reading, but it is a very coherent story where everything ties neatly together. So we have Herr Oberst, who after his time as a Nazi, whatever he was at the camp, came to America and hid, and took on a new identity as a film producer, and then made himself disappear, mainly out of fear of being killed by some of the other emotional vampires. He's making a power play from behind the scenes. We have Ms. Melanie Fuller, who really just wants to be left alone, other than having her little zombies to control. And then you have the secret cabal of vampires who get together yearly to play a game using human pawns, which they control. So it's a death game on an island, and they just play their humans against each other till one human survives. But the humans don't get a reward because they're not doing anything. They're just like the meat puppets. So, this cabal is also extremely powerful. They control a lot of FBI resources. I mean, in this inner city Philadelphia scene, there's over 100 FBI agents, all over in this inner city neighborhood, undercover and running a major operation, helicopters and secret vans and all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, they're powerful. They have a big-time televangelist. In fact, it was kind of funny. They bring up some different televangelists of the day. There's a billionaire. And then there's some other major figures as well. And all of them illustrate some of the variations on their talent. Like the emotional vampire that's the televangelist, his big talent is to get people to send him money. Well, isn't that what televangelists do? Send me money or God's gonna strike ya. Oh, reach out to the TV and let me bless you. Whatever they do. Or they talk in tongues. Or there's the guy that laughs. Ha 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 ha. For minutes on end. So, yeah, sorry if you're offended, but yeah, I don't really have much time for televangelists. Funny sometimes to watch a short clip, but and it's also, speaking of variations on talent, another character, I won't call him major. He gets a few scenes of his own, but another character that shows up is Tony Herrod. He's interesting because he tries to play all sides, and really, he's looking out for number one, Tony Herrod. He has this mental quirk. And they sort of explain it later, but it only lets him use his talent on women. And he mostly uses his talent to get women to do sexual things with him. Really sexual things. And doesn't care if they want it or not. And He has an assistant named Maria Chen, who's what they call a neutral, which means she's immune to control. And they make an interesting team, especially toward the end. Just a couple of some twists I didn't see coming between the two of them. Some I did, but I felt it was a satisfying conclusion between the two of them. I will say that without telling you what the conclusion was. But he is a movie producer also. He was mentored by Herr Oberst, who also mentored him in this whole here's how you can use your talent thing. And but now that Herr Oberst has gone into hiding and is pretending to be dead, he's gotten involved with this island group because I guess he needs somebody to be his daddy. And so he's doing work for the island group also. Some of it against Herr Oberst, and other times he's trying to work for Herr Oberst. Like I said, he's kind of a little worm, but makes for an interesting character. So our three main characters have to begin by looking at Ms. Fuller, because they're looking at this horrible mass homicide that happened very quickly with a lot of random people in Charleston, South Carolina. And but in trying to locate her, they begin in Charleston, where it happened, but they end up in Washington, D.C., where the FBI starts to get involved. Philadelphia. Later on, they end up in California. There's a couple scenes in Mexico and in Israel also. And eventually the book ends in Charleston and an island that's kind of off the coast of South Carolina. This secret island where the Cabal likes to do their death matches. And you have multiple groups with many goals, but like I said, I felt it held together very well. It's a complicated story with several plots interweaving, but they all tie together and make the finish a lot more dramatic. I will concede that the chess match at the finish got a little long. It included illustrations of the chessboard and everything, and I was just like, really? But overall, I thought it was pretty well done. And like I said, it was satisfying how some of the characters had their arcs ended, whether victorious or dead or permanent punishment. So is it horror? Yeah, I think so. At times they rely more on atmosphere, but toward the end, especially when we meet Ms. Fuller's new household of zombies, yeah, that's kind of horrific. Especially since several of them are characters that you got attached to before they got taken over. I'll be honest, I don't read a lot of horror. I don't know why. There was a time back in high school and a little bit of college that I would read Stephen King, he's hit or miss. But so I can't compare it really to other works, but definitely more literary than Stephen King. But this guy's a teacher also, and he used to teach gifted students and developed a whole gifted student curriculum. So this is a smart guy, this author. Another thing I should note is that the novel does have several action scenes. Now, I'll admit it. I'm one of those that when I get to an action scene, sometimes I'm like, okay, action, and I'll just skim through it. And I did a little bit with this one too, but I will say it's detailed, well thought out. I'm glad I didn't skim through the first action sequence, because one of the confusing things, if you're not really reading, is who's possessing who. And who's just an innocent victim that just blundered into it. That's very useful. I'm that way with action scenes in TV and movies too. Like James Bond starts with a dramatic chase, you're just like, okay, get on with the movie. But one thing I appreciated about the action scenes is they can be brutal. And people get hurt and killed. We have characters with permanent scarring, missing toes or fingers. emotional damage, dead. In fact, one of the main characters does end up dead during the course of this book. Basically, you know that anybody can get hurt or die. But I think, the true horror of this novel is the idea of losing this. I live here. This is where Wasky Squirrel is. And if somebody can just come in and say, nope, that's mine, that's terrifying. I think of like the slow motion horror of Alzheimer's disease. I know some people who are going through that slow motion horror right now. They don't know who I am anymore. It's horrifying, and Dan Simmons made it a little faster, turned it into a book, and said, hey, people have this power. And how do you fight someone, because these are people, how do you fight someone who can just take over your brain? Well, they do figure out a way. I found it interesting. But the reality that you're left with at the end of this book is, okay, we got these couple of vampires, but there's always more going to pop up through human history. And they're always out there to grab onto our worst impulses. And I think that's the real horror of Carrion Comfort. So, yeah, I was not thrilled with Song of Kali, but I did enjoy this one. I'm looking at reading some more of his horror this summer. Of course, this isn't going to be the Dan Simmons show. I've got lots of books I want to talk about. In fact, some nonfiction is going to come soon. I guess I've already done one nonfiction book, but I'll do more. So, wide variety of books coming, but this is one I'm happy to recommend. A little long, and maybe a little slow at some points, but Dan Simmons is pretty good at holding your interest. And the number of characters and the well thought out plot, even though it's complicated, really work. So, I want to thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.